even in the scenarios about water collection, you mentioned some situational awareness and security measures, such as having it in a being the gray man, having it be non-conspicuous, maybe doing it at night to avoid being conspicuous as well. We're getting into the discussion that some of that would need to be coordinated, and you're thinking about security. So let's talk about two topics. First of all, communication, because some of these things need to be coordinated if you have a group, and then the last thing would be protection. So can we first talk about communication?
Right. So communications are another one of those things that there's a lot of disinformation, because people will sell you ham radios. Okay. A ham radio is a class of bandwidth that was set aside for the amateurs in America, for people. All right. And radio waves don't work the way people think they do. People think that because you're on 7.023 megahertz, that you could, and if someone's not on 7.024 megahertz, that you could also broadcast with them. And you can't. Waves have what's called a bandwidth. That's why we use cell phones, not radios, because the cell phone towers use one frequency and they decode it all. So when you talk on a radio, anyone who is within that kind of area of frequency is going to be able to hear you, and you're going to be able to hear them, and you can't talk over one another. So ham radio is not this universal communication. Long distance ham radio, that's where the misinformation comes in, because most people will sell you a handset, okay? And they'll call it a ham radio. The most common was the Bofang UV5R, because they were as cheap as $5 at one point. The Bofang UV5R, okay? So that radio goes about 100 yards, even though it will tell you it will do 10 miles. It will tell you that it will do to line of sight on the globe, if you believe that it is a globe, okay? That would be 7.2 miles for a 6-foot person, okay? If you believe that we're on the globe, that's how far the radio signal would technically be able to go before it bottoms out on the curvature of the earth. I have never seen a handheld that will do more than a couple hundred yards, even in the woods in Florida, out hog hunting. More than 500 yards just isn't, with nothing in between but flat. All right. More than a couple hundred yards really is not reliable on those handhelds. They are not ham radios. There just happens to be some frequencies in the VHF, which stands for very high frequency, and UHF, ultra high frequency range, that is licensed as ham, that only ham operators are supposed to be able to use, even though no one requires your license for these handsets. The frequency range for long distance communications is called HF, all right? And that spans about 1.5 megahertz to about 30 megahertz, okay? Now, for those of you whose eyes are not glassed over yet, because I'm sure as soon as I started mentioning numbers, a lot of you went offline, all right? But that band of frequencies is called HF, and that's where you'll find real ham radios. Now, it used to be that you needed a license to buy a ham radio, but you don't anymore. You can, if you want to buy a name brand like an ICOM or a Yaesu, you might find a seller who's going to require your ham license. But there's tons of people selling Chinese radios who couldn't care less if you have a ham license. But the problem with HF is that you can't just hook it to a little antenna and expect it to work. High frequency HF radios use frequencies that have big, huge band sizes, all right? Big, huge wave sizes. And they need big, huge antennas. There are some that claim that they're maybe 6 feet tall, and they have a coil at the bottom that because it technically is long enough to catch that length wave, it will work, and it does work. If you're on high ground, you can put one of those on a tripod, and they work okay for a couple hundred miles. More than a couple hundred miles, forget it. But there's plenty of radios that you can get for $200-300 from China under the Xiegu XIEGU line. that are $200-300 that will go 150, 250 miles with just a regular wire antenna. And you can get, it's called an end-fed dipole. If you search eBay for end-fed dipole, sorry, I forgot about this interview. I'm at Dunkin' Donuts, so that's what all the background noise is, including the grinder. It's called an end-fed dipole. So if you search for eBay for HF transceiver, you're going to find all the radios. And if you search for end-fed dipole, you will find the antennas. Now, I just did an article on Grid Down last week on this, and I linked to all kinds of cool stuff. There's a new radio called a USDX that has some that's $120 or something, that is only a few watts, but will reach out to on all the ham bands. It will reach out to 150 miles or so. So if you just have kids and you want to be able to take a slingshot and send a wire, pull up an antenna at you and your kids' houses 100 miles away from each other, you'll be able to talk on all the ham bands. Just don't talk on them without a license, okay? Because you can listen all you want. But if you go on there and you try to talk without a license, like I said, anyone can hear you and will hear you. And there's a lot of Nancys in the ham world. I mean, I think it's part of the test that you have to get an I am a Nancy tattoo or something, because they like to rat people out. They like their little space and they want to keep it nice. Okay. They're not like most Americans. So I believe that hamtestonline.com is where you can find a pretty good educational thing to be able to take your ham test. Your local radio club will test you. They're not hard to get. You can get all 3 licenses in the same seating usually. Not expensive if there's a charge at all. All right. Ham tests are difficult. There's all kinds of useless information about electronics in there that you will never need. But it's a gate to entry to get your ham license. Now, going into a war, and if you're a young man, I would not advertise the fact that you have radio communication skills, okay? Because if there's a draft coming, you're going to be on that list. But those resources are out there, and you can listen on ham all you want. And if you can hear them, and you have the correct antenna set up, you have a Balun set up with your antenna, which an end-fed dipole is going to come with like a 49-to-1 Balun, which it changes the impedance between the wire and your radio, so that it's the correct impedance, so that you don't get this standing wave problem. I'm not going to get into all that. I do not have a ham license, and as you can see, I'm pretty well versed because I don't want anyone to know that I have radio skills. There's if you want to just listen, all right, just for those of you who are still hanging in there, if you want to just listen, okay? And listening is really important because all the police, all the military, they all use those handhelds. And if you can watch, and if you have electricity and you can watch on a screen that you see jumps in these VHF and UHF communication systems, because VHF and UHF is great for team use, especially when there's a repeater. Like the people who use the handhelds, they're using repeaters that are mounted on a local antenna. Okay, that's what all the police use, all the fire use. They all use VHF and UHF because they have their own repeater. They even have their own encryption system. But if you can just see the signals, there's plenty of cheap ways to be able to see those signals using your computer. It's called RTL-SDR, okay? Someone figured out that this little cheap computer chip could be used as a radio receiver instead of expensive crystals. So they made these things that plug right into your computer, that this free software that's RTL-SDR.com is even, I mean, that's a company that sells them. They sell them for way too much. You don't have to pay that. You can go on eBay. If you search Prepping 101, you'll see my articles that I've done for many years. You can get what's called a disc cone antenna that has these prongs sticking out of it for not a lot of money, and just hoist that up, and you'll see a lot of signals. I'm not going to say that you're going to see ham signals from Germany. If you want to be able to talk to Germany, talk to Japan. There's a lot of hams in Japan and a lot of hams in Germany. You'll hear them with your HF rig. And if you get even your end-fed dipole, you probably will be able to talk to with a 100-watt rig. You probably will be able to talk anywhere in the world. It's that crazy. That's how easy it is to do. Now, on that recent article that I did, I'll mention briefly that if you want a 100-watt radio, they are upwards of $1,000, unless you buy an old one. Now, the new ham radios that are from ICOM and Yaesu and Tentec, those are all the name brands. If you want a radio that just is made for talking, you can get an old Yaesu, you can get an old Kenwood, or an old ICOM, or an old Tentec that has tube finals. I wiped out all the FT101s back in the day on Prepping 101. They went from $150 on eBay to $500 overnight because my people all wiped them out. Now, I just covered it again a couple weeks ago. So you're probably not going to find a Kenwood 520 or a Yaesu FT101 right now for cheap, unless you already subscribed back when I told you to subscribe the last time we did this, and you already got on it, because the early bird gets the worm. But those old radios out there, if you can find a local ham fest, you can say to the guy, "Hey, does this work? I just want to talk." And he'll say, "Oh yeah, it talks. You can't do RTTY on it. You can't do blah. You can't do all these things that I don't ever intend to use in my life. All these data transfer things, not interested. I just want to be able to talk." And on all the old radios, the ones that are purely transistor and the ones that have transistor preamps and tube finals, they all work. All these old hams have been dying for the last 10 years. All their radios are out there, and none of the hams want them, because the real hams, they want to do all that fun stuff. They want all the advanced communication options. They don't want the tube radios, but the preppers do. And now, because, a lot of people in the prepper world followed Prepping 101 back in the day, and they started selling, selling content based on what I did. Even the Mormon food, turned people onto the Mormon food, which you can't get anymore. The Mormon food was like number 10 cans of sealed number 10 cans of food for crazy prices, like supermarket prices. The smart people followed me. The smart people still follow me at Guns America Digest, because I do all kinds of stuff.
Speaking of Guns America, we have so many more topics, but if we could just touch on protection before we move forward. That's a very, very broad topic. It could take as long as we've talked about all these topics just on that one. But what are some key elements that you think are important for people to think about so that they don't just fall into the most common pitfalls when people are trying to prepare in that way?
The most common pitfalls that I've seen is fear. Is people who don't know anything about guns. They think that they have to get a training course and safety training and all of this stuff before they go out and buy a gun. And you don't have to. A gun, when you pull the trigger, it goes bang and it kills whatever's in front of it. So as long as you're careful to never point that at something you don't want to kill with your finger anywhere near the trigger, that's number one rule of gun safety, whether you're at the range, whether you're anywhere. All right. It's simple. Don't put your finger in the trigger guard ever, unless you want to kill something right now. Okay. I tell people when it comes to handguns that if they're not familiar with guns and they're not going to be shooting their gun at least at decent intervals, that if they want a handgun, to get a revolver, because you can't screw it up. You swing out the cylinder, you load your cylinders, close the cylinder, pull the trigger, it goes bang. Okay? It every time, upside down, in your pocket, anywhere. Okay? It's not like a semi-auto where there might be something you have to, did I rack the side? Do I have a round in the chamber? And the nice thing also about a double action revolver Ruger, Smith and Wesson, Taurus. Taurus is the most affordable. They're pretty reliable these days. Is that a kid usually is not going to have the finger strength to pull that trigger. A kid who isn't of age, who isn't 8, 9, 10, where they can understand gun safety and you can actually take them out and shoot with them, and they understand what guns do. A kid is not going to have the finger strength to pull that trigger. Okay, not so much with a semi-auto that might have the safety might have come off in your purse or in your holster, and someone puts their finger into the trigger guard by mistake. That I would say is it. Now the other misconception is that there is such thing as a powerful handgun. There isn't. Handguns go pop 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 in the movies for a reason, because they're really not that much power. They can't go through a lot of stuff, and they don't really have that much devastating impact when they hit. Most people who are hit with handgun rounds don't die right away. They keep coming. All right. If you want to be able to shoot through things, if you want something that is going to impart some real destructive energy on its targets, you need a rifle. I strongly suggest the AR-15. You do have to learn how to use it. It's not that complicated. Even taking apart and putting it back together is very easy, and it is a devastating weapon. Devastating weapon. And right now, the gun industry is in the toilet. Go out and buy if all you got's a Glock, go out and buy an AR for $400. You know, the ARs the cheap ARs work just as good as the expensive ARs these days. The expensive ARs are meant for a lot of rounds. They're meant for more accuracy. They're meant for people to feel good about how much money they just spent on an AR. You know, you can get a reliable, good, no-name AR for $450 right now. If not, even a Smith and Wesson M&P, $500-600. A Springfield Saint is, I think, under $1,000 right now. These are inexpensive guns that will do the job every time, no matter what. And you do not want to mess with that cartridge. Goes at 3,000 feet per second. It's a very light bullet. Goes at 3,000 feet per second and will literally burn through AR-500 steel. I tested it on AR-500 body armor, and it burned a hole in the body armor. Okay, it didn't have much after that to go through more other stuff, but that's how nasty of a cartridge that thing is with a regular old 55 grain bullet. Okay, and there's plenty of Russian ammo out there that's cheap now. There's plenty of I mean, Guns America's got a lot of ammo on it now, I guess too. But ammo is available right now, and ARs are like they're giving them away in cereal boxes right now because the gun industry is in the toilet. Go buy an AR. There's other things I can get into. I can get into I know about pretty much every gun that's almost ever been made. But if I was going to pick one battle rifle that everyone should own, it is an AR-15. Simple.
What about some comments? You've been talking about the tools themselves here, but what about the comments of strategies for home protection?
The less people who know what you're doing, the better. It's just don't tell anyone. Don't tell your neighbor, don't brag to people. Don't tell anyone. Get stuff delivered either from Instacart or Walmart delivery right to your door. And no one's ever logging what they drop off at your door. You can get big 25-pound bags of flour from Instacart, from Costco. And sometimes they have even 50-pound bags of rice at Costco. Just use Instacart. Have it delivered. Don't bump into your neighbor with a full cart of beans and rice and flour. Don't do it. Just keep to yourself. And the same thing with guns. Don't let people know. Don't be the big tough guy who's got to brag about his guns. Just keep a lid on things. I don't do it, obviously, because I decided, I don't know why. I just decided out of love for my fellow man that I was going to expose myself when I first got into this because I could afford to do all this stuff. I didn't have to be paid off by a prepper food company to pitch their prepper food. I had the income to buy all these things, review them, buy the sun oven, review it, buy all of these things and show people how they work because I could afford it. And it helps people to understand what they can potentially afford and not to waste their time on Brita water filters and Berkey water filters and all the other stupid and Patriot Food Supply and all the other stupid things that are meant to take advantage of people out there.
Paul, there's so many more topics we want to get to the next time we get together. Growing food, EMPs, nuclear radiation, and so many other topics. We're going to have to wrap for today, and very grateful for you taking time out of your day to give us a whirlwind tour of about 10 different topics here. And if people want to go to, we're going to put lots of links in the description of this video with a lot of the places that you mentioned: Layman's Hardware, griddownmag.com, Uline for the Mylar bags, Star and Bullock Hardware at sbhardware.com, etc. But if you have any additional links you want to mention to our viewers, just make sure you send them to me. We'll put them in the description of this video so people have everything, and we'll make sure that they can find you. If they want to find your work, sounds like griddownmag.com is a place to start there.
That's where the new stuff is, and there's a link there to the Prepping 101 archives. So if you just think, what about this, what about that, search Guns America Digest, and you'll probably come up with it.
Paul Helinski, thank you for joining us again here on behalf of all of our viewers on Liberty and Finance.
Anytime, Dunnigan. Thanks.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.